Christy. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 11 of my 2020 holiday card series. Today I'm going to be making a card using Sunny Studios Sledding Critters. So I've stamped out this image on some Nina Solar White cardstock with Lawn Fawn jet black ink, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. So the first combo that I'm using is C0, C1, and C3. And I actually started with just the C1 and C0, and I'm going to be coloring any of the critters that I want to be white, or any of the areas, I should say, that I want to be white. So a lot of people might be intimidated by an image like this because it's got a lot of detail, but it's really no different than stamping out a whole bunch of images and coloring those in. So you just want to break it down into little steps. So like I said, I'm starting with just the white areas. I used the C1 to add a little bit of shading, and then I'm going to blend that out with the C0. And I did that for the penguin and the body of the sheepdog. And then I'll begin working on my seal, and I have switched to using that C3 now as my darkest. So I'm adding a little bit of shading down the back of his face and body, and then I'll begin to blend that out with the C1, just kind of coloring over the edge of that C3 to soften that area and make a smooth transition, and then fill in any white space with the C0. I also colored in the sheepdog's ears with the C3 and the C1. And then I decided that I actually wanted to make that seal just a little bit darker. So I brought in the C5, and I'm going to recolor him in a second layer, but adding in that darker shade. And I'll do the same for the sheepdog's ears. I just wanted a little bit more contrast so that each of the animals would be a bit more unique and not so much the same. So I added that C5 in and then blended out with the C3 and then the C1 for those areas. For the penguin, I'm going to darken things even further by taking away the C1 and adding in the C7. So I'll add a little of that darkest shade down the two sides of his body and in between his eyes above his beak. And then I'll blend that out with the C5, leaving a little sliver of area there for that lightest shade, the C3, on his wing and also on the top of his head and the side of his face there on the right. My next combo is E50, E51, E53, and E55. Again, to create some contrast, I'm going to color the llama's face different than his fur. So I'm using that E55 to lay in some shadow on that and on his muzzle and his ears. And then I'm going to blend that out with the E53 and leave a little bit of room for some E51 on his face and muzzle. I just use those darkest two shades for his ears. And then for his fur, I'm going to skip all the way down to the E50 and just add a little light shading around the outer edges. And I did do a double layer of that just to intensify the saturation. And then I'm going to go and work on the little dog, and I'm going to start with the E51, and I'll add some shading on the right hand side and under his head and on his ears. And then I'll blend that out softly with the E50 just by kind of flicking towards the top left area there. And that's going to be it for him. Now that my seal has dried, I'm going to come back in with the C5 marker and just add a few dots to his hide to make him look extra cute. I'll use YR04 to color in the penguin's beak, just real quick and easy. And then I'll use R20 and R22 to color in the dog's tongues, and also the llama's nose and the inside of its ears with that R20. So now that I have tackled all of the critters, I'm going to work on their accessories, and I'm going to start with the seal. So I'm using R22, R24, and R29 for his stocking cap, and I'm just coloring the center area. So I use that R29 on the hat brim edge and the right hand side, and blended towards the left with the R24 and the R22. And then while I have those marker combinations out, I'm going to color in one of the bows on the Christmas gift. So I just added the darkest in the center of the bow and at the top and bottom of the ribbon. And then I'm blending out with the R24 and the R22. And I just wanted to pick a different red combination because the sleigh is also going to be red later, but I wanted that to be much darker. So that's why I went with a more pinky red for these first items. So the llama's hat is going to be in a nice kind of teal combo. I'm using BG72, BG75, and BG78, just placing my shading on the same areas as I did for the penguin. He's also wearing a scarf, so I'm going to color that in to match just by adding that darkest shade on the outside edges and the bottom of the part that is folded over. And then I'll blend that out with the BG75 and then have a little bit of space there that is left for the BG72, so I get a nice highlight in the center towards the bottom of his face. And then I'm going to do the rest of that gift with the red bow in this combination as well. I really loved how that teal and the red looked together. I just thought they were so pretty and just slightly different than the traditional red and green. It's teal and more of like a salmony red. The next combo I'm using is R81, R83, and R85, and I'm going to do the dog's stocking cap and scarf with these shades. And for him, I decided not to make his hat brim white. I decided to just color it in as if it's the same material kind of folded up, but I did leave the little pom-pom on top white. And then for his scarf, I'm coloring it in the same way, just also adding in those little lines that the artist has drawn there, and accentuating the areas where it's kind of scrunched together. And then again, putting that highlight right under his face, and then on the top of the edge of the scarf. And then I decided to do the bow on the other gift in the back of the sleigh with this combo as well. I really love adding pink in for Christmas. I think it's just really pretty and soft, and yeah, I just think it's really nice. So now I'm going to move on to a green combo for my penguin. I'm using G43, G46, and then I wanted to darken that up a bit, so I decided to pull in the G99. And I'm going to do his stocking cap all solid, including the pom-pom. So I use that G99 just real sparingly on the right-hand side there, accentuating each separate part of that hat, and then blended toward the left with the G46 and then the G43. And then for his scarf, I'm going to do it the same as I did with everybody else. I'm just putting a little bit of a darker shadow on the right-hand side, since he's turned a little bit more toward the left, so you wouldn't see that side as much. And then I'm going to color the last gift with this green combo as well. And it looks a little funny at first when I put the olive with the pink, but once I get everything blended out, I actually really liked how those two looked together as well. So I just put the darkest color on either side and on the bottom where the sleigh would be casting a shadow. And then for the lid, I just put the shadow on either side of the bow and blended toward the edges with the lighter shades. I'll use W00 and W1 to color in the white parts on the hats. I wanted to do a warm gray so it would be a little bit separate from the cool grays that I used on the critters. So I just added a little bit of that W1 on the sides, blended out with the W00 and let it fade into the white. And then for the top edge of the sleigh, I'm going to use Y21 and Y26. I'm trying to create kind of a gold look, and it's kind of hard to achieve with Copics, but I find that these two colors work well. So I'm using that Y26 to just do a line at the bottom edge to make it look like it's kind of rounded and curved. And then I'm going to blend toward the top with the Y21, just fill in all of that white space. And then I'm going to come back in and do a second layer with that Y26 to just increase that depth and saturation, give it a little bit more punch since I'm only using 2 shades instead of my usual 3. And then I blended that over quickly with the Y21 again. And then I'm going to do the bottom part of the sleigh exactly the same, just starting with that Y26, coloring about halfway of that space, and then filling in with the Y21. And I'll do the second layer of that part off screen. So I've saved the biggest part of this image for last. It's that big sleigh. So I'm going to use R24, R29, R39, and R59. I'm starting with the R59 and I'm going to bring that color in from both the left and the right and just bring it in a little ways because I need to have room for all 4 of those shades. But having all 4 of those shades is going to just make that image really pop and give it a lot of depth. So then I'll bring in the R39 and you can see I'm just going right over the edge of the R59 and kind of pulling that darker color in with me as I color in this next shade so that I create a nice smooth transition between those. Especially with an image that is this large, you really want a nice smooth blend because if not, it's going to pull your eye down there away from all of those adorable critters and it's going to be super noticeable. So now I'm using that R29 and again I'm doing that same technique, just grabbing the edge of that R39 and pulling it with me towards the center space and making sure to just go over those transition areas and smooth everything out. And then finally I will come in with this R24 and fill in all the rest of that white space. And you can see how having those darker shades on the outside edges almost makes the middle of this sleigh glow. It's just so bright and vibrant. If I see any areas where there's some patchiness, I'm going to smooth that over. And then there is a little step inside or a seat, and I'm going to color that in with those same shades so that it matches the exterior of the sleigh. So now I'll take my black Sakura Jelly Roll pen and color over the eyes of the seal and the penguin and the little dog. That just makes them nice and bright and shiny, kind of brings the images back to life. And I'm going to take a white gel pen and go over the eyes of the llama. And then I'm going to trim this image out with its coordinating die. So since I spent all that time coloring that image, I'm going to make the rest of the card easy on myself. And I'm going to use some pattern papers from the Very Merry 6x6 pack. And I'm definitely going to feature this beautiful background image because that's going to make my card so simple to create. But it's also going to be super eye-catching because it's got all that depth to it. And then I also picked a contrasting pattern in red. I trimmed the red one out with the Frilly Frames lattice outer die, and then this one I just trimmed down with my paper trimmer, and I'm going to stamp a sentiment directly on the bottom using Lawn Fawn's Noble Fur ink. And I'm using the sentiment that comes with the set that says "Dashing Through the Snow." And I'm going to stamp that down a couple of times to make sure that I have a really good impression. And then instead of popping my card base in, I'm actually going to do an insert because I'm going to be using a very dark cardstock. So I just trimmed down a piece of white pattern paper, and now I'm going to stamp this sleigh image again. But I'm going to offset it off the edge of the card just to make it look a little bit different. And then I'm using the rest of the sentiment that is included in this set that says "Sledding By with a Holiday High." I'm going to glue that into the inside of my card base, and that is made from a piece of Lawn Fawn's Noble Fur cardstock. So I just scored and folded that to a standard A2 size card in the landscape orientation. So I just smoothed that on the inside. And now I've got that red piece that I mentioned earlier. I decided to pop that up with some foam tape just to add some lift to the card and create a bit of a drop shadow behind all that beautiful scallop. So I'm going to center that on the card front and pop that down into place. And then I will add some liquid glue to the back of that pattern paper with the background print and center that right in between all of that stitching detail on the red panel. And then I've got my image here, this big beautiful image, so I'll add some more liquid glue to the back of that, making sure to glue down the bottom of the sleigh as well. And then I'm going to center that above the sentiment on the right hand side of the card. And then of course I had to add some sparkle with some Stardust stickles, and I am going to bling this baby up. I'm telling you, I added so much of this stuff. Normally I have to restrain myself. On this card I didn't even try. I just let myself go at it. So I added some sparkle to the two bows on the gifts and then to all of the little hats. I put it on the hat brims and the pom-poms, and then also to the scarves. And I don't like to cover an entire image with the stickles. I feel like that might be a little too much, so I always kind of stick to the highlighted areas, the shadowed areas, I should say, and just add the sparkle there where it will have the most contrast against that darker color. And then to kind of add something to the background, since, you know, it's pretty flat otherwise, I decided to add a line of stickles to the tops of both of those snowbanks. So I just did a little line and then kind of spread it out a bit with the nozzle. And then I decided to also add some to the snowfall, but I'm kind of just picking and choosing. I don't want to add it to all of it because, again, I think that would be too much. But the snow is made from the same snow that's falling from the sky, so it makes sense that some of it would have some sparkle to it. So I'll lift that up to the light so you can see all of that glitter. Oh my. And give you another peek at the inside. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. I post new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you'd like to watch day 11 of the previous 2 years of holiday card series, you can find those on screen right now. You can just click to check out either one of them. If you're interested in any of the products that I used, you can find those listed and linked below the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you all have an absolutely amazing day. Bye-bye.